what did you make of Mr. Fisher's comments to our Mr. Leisman?
I am with you. I was rather surprised by that comment, especially in light of, of the minutes that came out, which said that the decision to tighten monetary policy was done somewhat reluctantly. A number of members said that they had barely made the decision. It was unanimous, of course, but it would appear that 3-4 perhaps of the FOMC members voted somewhat under duress. The market had anticipated, therefore, that at best one, perhaps two more levels of tightening of the overnight Fed funds rate were likely this year, but then Mr. Fisher said 4. That one caught me off guard, caught a lot of people off guard. I was rather surprised. I expect something completely different from Mr. Fisher.
So what would you ascribe this current turbulence that we're seeing in equities worldwide to? Is it that the market is out of step with the Fed, or are there other reasons to do with just softness of demand globally?
I think the Fed is out of step with the market. If we are to accept Mr. Fisher as being the bellwether of the FOMC, then the FOMC is out of step with the market. I think your point earlier about the trade deficit numbers both being exports down and imports down, I thought that was very important. The fact that both of them were lower indicates, even though the trade deficit itself had fallen, and I don't pay that much attention to the trade deficit over the last 25 years, I've found it to be basically meaningless. But the fact that both imports and exports were down tells us the economy itself is generally weakening. That seems to be a far more important piece of data than Mr. Fisher's comments. I think the Fed is out of step with the markets, not the markets out of step with the Fed.
Morning, Dennis. Can I just ask you then about non-farm payrolls, because obviously we're waiting for that number tomorrow. Is the big risk here then that we get a much weaker number than expected, because it kind of plays into that rhetoric again that actually the Fed's tightening into an existing slowdown?
Well, I think tomorrow's non-farm payrolls number is going to be quite strong, especially in light of the ADP number. That ADP number was surprisingly firm. That large an increase in private payrolls has to have everybody ratcheting up their figures for tomorrow's number. I think that number is going to be quite strong, not weak. So that's going to be one piece of information that is different or consistent with what Mr. Fisher had to say, but completely at variance with what the capital markets are doing. So these are confusing times. I've only been at this for 40 years, but I must admit these are very confusing periods.